The club is still there. The greens crew is still there. The man who has managed this property through 2 decades of salt air and ocean wind is still on the property. But the decisions, the firmness target, the green speed, the watering policy, the flag placement, those belong to someone else. The moment the USGA opens a US Open, the host club's agronomic authority transfers. The crew executes. The USGA decides. You don't see that on the broadcast. What you see is the course. What you see is the architecture William Flynn rebuilt into the Southampton hillside in 1931. The punch bowl greens, the blind approaches, the fescue flowing in from the ocean side like it was always meant to. What you see, if you're paying attention, is whether the greens are holding or burning, whether the ball is checking up or rolling out, whether the setup is fair or whether someone miscalculated. What you don't see is who's running the calculation, what instrument they used, or how close the margin was the morning before play began. This is what Shinnecock Hills looks like from underneath championship week, and the margin is closer than you think. If you want to understand how a US Open course is managed in the days and mornings it's actually on the line, subscribe. This channel runs those systems. The USGA's championship agronomy operation begins weeks before the field tees off. By the time practice rounds start, the course has already been walked, graded, and flagged. Not for aesthetics, for measurement. Firmness is read with a device called the GS3, a ball dropped from a standardized fixture. The depth of penetration tells you how firm the surface is. Lower number means firmer green. Every green at a US Open receives 9 readings per morning spread across the green surface. That's not one number per green. That's 9. They're averaged. The number is compared against the USGA's internal target for that day's conditions, and then the crew decides whether that surface is on the right side of the line or the wrong side. The 9 reading average does not happen in a vacuum. The morning firmness check sits at the end of a cycle that started the previous evening, and the quality of the morning number depends entirely on the quality of what was done after the last poot dropped the day before. Behind play, crew members walk greens that have already been putted out for the day. They're carrying portable moisture meters, handheld probes pushed into the turf to read the soil moisture content at the root zone. What they're looking for is a specific band of moisture, not too wet, not too dry. The USGA's championship agronomy team has documented this process across multiple US Opens. The target band is calibrated to the individual course, not copied from one championship to the next. What worked at the Olympic Club in 2012, where crews documented a target in the range of 20 to 22%, soil moisture, and used a color-coded flag triage. Red flags marking surfaces below threshold and needing water, yellow at threshold, blue above, is not the same number Shinnecock runs on sand versus clay. The USGA adjusts the target. The crew follows the flag. The Shinnecock surface presents a specific challenge the flag triage has to account for every evening. The greens are running heavily to annua on a free-draining sand base with fine fescue across the hillsides and rough, fully exposed to ocean wind. Sand doesn't hold water the way a clay subbase does. Ocean exposure means the wind is not a variable to plan for so much as a constant to account for, one that changes pace and direction faster than a weather model can update. When the USGA crew walks behind play in the evening, they're asking a question the next morning's reading will answer. Did the surface move toward the target overnight, or did the wind take it somewhere that wasn't intended? The answer shapes everything that happens before sunrise. Morning setup at a US Open has a specific order, and the order is not arbitrary. The greens are mowed first. A double cut, 2 passes across the surface, the second pass at right angles to the first. That right angle cut matters because it runs the grain opposite to itself, preventing the mowing direction from biasing the roll toward one side of the cup. Without it, a putt hit, dead center on a slope, edges fractionally toward the grain. At championship green speeds, that fraction is the difference between holding a line and missing by 6 inches. The mowing happens before hole cutting every time, without exception. The reason is mechanical. Once the mowing equipment has rolled across a green, whatever the machine does to the surface is done. The hole cutter goes in after, so the cup edge isn't compromised by the weight of the mower. The hole cutter itself is sharpened by hand each morning, not by machine. By hand to a knife edge because a dull plug cutter tears the turf instead of cutting it cleanly, and a torn hole edge is a hole that doesn't hold its geometry under championship foot traffic. After the holes are set, the GS3 readings are taken, 9 per green. That morning number is compared to the previous evening's moisture read and the overnight weather, wind speed, dew point, temperature drop. On a day when conditions are running hotter and windier than forecast, the crew may apply what USGA Senior Director of Championship Agronomy, Darren Bavard, describes as a light spritz. A very light amount of water applied by hand, by hose, around the hole location specifically to prevent wilt from the foot traffic that will come when groups cluster at the cup. It is not irrigation in the conventional sense. It is a targeted application measured in seconds, not minutes, and it happens before the first tee shot of the day is struck. Beveridge states the USGA's position plainly. Greens are not watered during play. The principle is that the course condition at the first tee shot of the day should, as closely as possible, be the condition through the final putt. The hand watering that happens before play, behind play, and in that narrow window of morning setup is the mechanism that makes that possible. Everything after the flag goes up is held to what was committed to before the round. What this creates is a morning to evening cycle that compounds. Each evening read informs the next morning decision. Each morning decision commits the course to a path it will hold for 4 to 5 hours of competitive play. Miss the morning red by a few percent of soil moisture in the wrong direction. Too dry and you're watching the surface accelerate through the afternoon. Miss it toward too wet and the course softens in a way the USGA never intended. Both mistakes are visible, and the history of Shinnecock Hills and championship play is a documented record of how small that margin actually is. 2004 was the 4th U.S. Open at Shinnecock. 2018 was the 5th. Both times the daily reset cycle ran up against conditions it couldn't hold, surfaces that moved faster than the morning read had projected, greens placed at locations that were defensible at dawn but weren't by mid-afternoon. The consequences were documented on the record and unmistakable. That history is not ancient. It is the reason the word careful appears in every conversation the USGA has had about Shinnecock's greens since. The cycle is the same operation it was in 2004. The difference in 2026 is the target, not the tool. And the tool is still a probe, a hose, and a crew reading numbers before the sun is fully up. That is not a problem Augusta National has in the same form. Augusta's bent grass greens sit above a sealed SubAir system, subsurface piping that can pull moisture out of the root zone on command or push it back in. The moisture control at Augusta is automated, directional, and instantaneous. Shinnecock has no such switch. Its reset is done by hand, with hoses against the wind on POA annua, by a crew reading numbers from probes and making judgment calls before the flags go up. Same goal, opposite tool. The reason the opposite tool matters is what Shinnecock's surface actually is underneath. The greens are POA annua, dominant on a sand base. Sand drains. When the wind comes in from the ocean side and runs longer and harder than the forecast suggested, the surface moisture that the evening crew measured is not the surface moisture the afternoon field encounters. The cycle works until the variable changes faster than the cycle turns. And at a course sitting in the coastal wind corridor between the Atlantic and Great Peconic Bay, that variable does not cooperate on a schedule. The fescue on the hillsides amplifies the exposure. Fine fescue is the correct plant for a lynx corridor. It tolerates drought, it tolerates salt, it goes dormant under heat pressure, and comes back without dying. It also takes roughly 3 years to recover after spectator tending compresses it into the ground. Before the 2018 Open, the crew under Superintendent John Jennings ran a turf operation to reshape the course. Roughly 130,000 square feet of turf cut into ribbons, trucked to a New Jersey sod farm, stored for close to a year, then rolled back into place to narrow fairways the way the championship setup required. Weeks of compressed work. All of it returns the surface to where it needs to be for a championship. None of it changes what happens when an unforecast wind arrives on a day when the morning read said the surface was ready. The hand watering is the response to that variability, and it is a precise operation. USGA crews document the pace. At the Olympic Club in 2012, hand watering crews moved across green surfaces at approximately 1,000 square feet per minute, a specific pace calibrated to deliver a uniform application without pooling. The flag triage tells the crew which greens to hit and which to skip. Red means below threshold, yellow means on target, blue means leave it. The crew covers the ground, records what they did, and the record feeds the next evening's read. The loop is closed every day. Evening, morning, mow, cut, read, decide, water if needed, hold the line. 4 days of competition rounds. Each day, the cumulative effect of every previous decision is already in the root zone. There is no reset button. There is only the cycle. For 2026, the USGA and the club have agreed to what the organization describes as playing the architecture. The rough is growing deeper, but not into new areas. The greens are being mowed tighter, targeting what the USGA calls tabletop speeds, fast and firm surfaces that reward the approach shot and test the putting, but not surfaces positioned on slope edges that punish any ball that reaches them. Spectator tenting has been pulled back, roughly one-third fewer structures than 2018, relocated toward the course perimeter so the fescue that took 3 years to recover from the 2018 footprint isn't compressed again. Ticket numbers are down 15 to 20% from the peak. The USGA needs roughly 1,800 to 2,000 volunteers on property on any given championship day. About 3,700 had already signed up as of spring of this year, with Eric Steimer, the USGA's director of the US Open, coordinating the ground logistics that failed in 2018 when shuttles arrived hours behind schedule. The vocabulary the USGA is using, play the architecture, is not aesthetic language. It is agronomic. At Shinnecock, that means accepting what the course does naturally. It gets firm, it gets fast. The wind reshapes the effective difficulty of every shot that lands near a slope. The job of Jennings and his crew, under USGA direction, is to set the surface at a target the architecture can hold across the range of conditions the week might deliver. Not to make the course easier, not to make it cartoonishly hard, to find the band where the design does what Flynn built it to do. How the crew finds that band is the same operation it has always been. Evening they read, morning they measure. Between those 2 points, across a sand base with no automated safety net, the surface is walked by hand and placed in the right position before the field arrives. The USGA's championship agronomy staff has documented this process. The moisture bands the portable meters are targeting, the pace at which hand watering crews move across a green surface, the fact that the exact soil moisture percentages they're aiming for are refined and calibrated to the conditions at each individual course and cannot simply be copied from one US Open to the next. The USGA adjusts. The crew follows. What doesn't adjust is the cycle itself. Behind play, before play, 9 readings per green, hand watered by judgment, not by switch. The cycle repeats every day of the championship. It will repeat in 2026 in the evenings after each round and in the mornings before each one, on a course that moves as fast as the conditions that shape it. The same cycle that has run at every US Open Shinnecock has hosted. The same cycle that is held and the same cycle that is broken, and the same cycle the crew runs again the next morning regardless. The crew that works Shinnecock Hills and Championship Week, executing USGA targets, reading moisture at dusk, making the final firmness call before the first group walks to the first tee, is doing exactly what a crew at any sand-based course does after a stretch of hot, dry coastal wind. They're trying to hold a number. The difference is that the number is being set by the USGA, not the club. The audience watching is in the hundreds of millions, and the last time the number slipped, it made the front page. Your home course doesn't run US Open Field on its greens. It doesn't need to, but the same instrument the USGA uses, the portable moisture meter the firmness read, the decision about whether this surface is ready for the conditions it's about to face, your crew uses too. The scale is different. The margin of error is wider. The wind off your local tree line is not the ocean at Shinnecock. But the physics that has pushed Shinnecock's greens past the line before is the same physics working on your home course's 5th green on a hot August Saturday when the morning hand water gets skipped. Same biology, same sand, same wind, different stakes. Now you know what they do before you tee off.